This is the deep dive, and we are about to be talking about the importance of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Today marks the official beginning of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. That's a worldwide campaign that runs from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. And this is a period where governments, communities, civil society, men, women, and young people all come together with one voice. And that is to say no to gender-based violence, no to silence, and yes to protecting lives. So Zimbabwe joins the rest of the world in this important movement. And tonight we're going to be looking at why these 16 days matter. We're going to ask what needs to change and how each and every one of us can take action. Seeing that, we are talking about issues that affect us in our society, that affect you and I on a day-to-day, or things that we've witnessed at some point in life. This actually just means that everybody has a contribution to this. So when we look at what needs to change and what each one of us can do to take action to make sure that there is that the gender-based violence issue is addressed. This is why we are getting into that on the deep dive. And right now I'm going to be talking to Mr. Alois Nyamazana. He's the Executive Director of Fathers Against Abuse. Good evening to you, Mr. Alois Nyamazana.
Good evening, my sister. How are you? Good
evening. Great. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive right here on Capitalk 100.4 FM.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Now we are talking about how today is marking the beginning of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and the importance of this campaign, and just looking at how everyone's coming together with the same voice to say no to gender-based violence, no to silence, and yes to protecting lives. What is the significance of the 16 days of activism, especially in the Zimbabwean context?
Thank you very much. The 16 days of activism against gender-based violence is a very important period where we take time to really concentrate on raising awareness against gender-based violence. So I think the first importance is that it's a period where we all focus on gender-based violence, mostly focusing on, number one, raising awareness, talking about gender-based violence. So we are all contributing our voices collectively, men, women, the elderly, the young. We are all talking about one thing. So it's basically about awareness raising on gender-based violence. Number two, the 16 days also gives us the time to really reflect on and to take stock in terms of our performance as a country regarding how we are doing in terms of fighting gender-based violence. So we are looking at statistics, we are looking at how we are performing. Are we ending child marriages? Are we ending domestic violence? Are we ending sexual violence? So it is a time when we reflect on our, efforts and interventions that we are putting in place to check if they are working, what is not working, what lessons can we learn from the work. Remember, we have 16 days is just a special period, but GBV, we fight it on a daily basis, we prevent it on a daily basis. So these 16 days are an opportunity for us to pause and reflect, to say, what are we, how is our performance, what can we do better, what can we start doing, what can we stop doing. So it's also a period of learning. We also even review the legal framework that we have, the policies, and even whether we are, complying with international legal frameworks that are there. So it's a period of and also even call to action. It's a time when we call everyone to action to say, what do we need to do? What can men do? What can women do? What can children do? What can institutions do? What can government do? So it's also a period for us to call to action in terms of addressing the period of the problem of gender-based violence. So it's a very critical moment where we come together to speak with one voice against gender-based violence.
Mm-hmm. Now, Alois, what are some of the common forms of gender-based violence in Zimbabwe?
I think in Zimbabwe, we have virtually all forms of gender-based violence that exist. So this year, I will talk about the current in Zimbabwe, or the global theme this year is focusing on ending technology-facilitated gender-based violence. So it's another form of gender-based violence that is emerging, apart from the other forms of GBV that you know. So let me talk first about that one, then I'll go to the others. So we have what we call technology-facilitated gender-based violence. It is gender-based violence that is perpetuated via digital and online platforms. So we do have our phones, we have our cell phones, we have the internet, emails, and all. So it's seen a rise in cases of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, issues like body shaming, using the internet, using the Facebook, Twitter, formerly Twitter, and all other platforms. So this is another global challenge that is rising: technology-facilitated gender-based violence, which is a form of gender-based violence. And also we do have what we call sexual violence. So sexual violence is basically a form of violence where people it includes issues like rape, and where people put themselves on others without consent. When it's men, you're talking about aggravated, indecent assault and all those things, and even issues around conduct that can actually violate somebody sexually, maybe sending some photos, exposing someone to videos, or even sharing, some message that is sexually explicit, sexting, and all those things. So those are some of the forms. And also we do have physical violence. So when we're talking about physical violence, we are basically talking about anything that harms the body, anything that harms the physical aspects of a person, including somebody being hit by a pot, somebody being burnt by boiling water, and all other things that can actually injure the body, resulting in things like death, injuries, and even disability. So that's physical abuse. We also have emotional abuse. Some call it verbal abuse, and psychological abuse. Usually there's a very thin line between emotional abuse, psychological, and verbal. But basically we're talking about emotional abuse. We are talking about gender-based violence that inflicts pain on somebody's emotion, that causes psychological harm. So there's things like name-calling, things like body shaming, and all those things. So psychological violence is about hurting a person emotionally and psychologically, using words, something like that.
I see. So, Alois, if someone's going through this, what services are available for gender-based violence survivors? Or if someone who's trying to get out of a situation like this, where could they report? What systems are in place to support them and help them to get out of situations like this?
Thank you very much. I think in terms of supporting survivors of gender-based violence, as a country, we do have quite a number of support mechanisms for survivors. So basically, the first point of call when somebody is abused is because, remember, we have the Domestic Violence Act that was enacted in 2007. So gender-based violence is a crime. So if a person is violated, if a person is exposed to gender-based violence, they have to report because it's a crime. So the person reports, and usually in Zimbabwe, then we now have what you call one-stop centers. I think if you go to hospitals like Nyamazana and other areas, I think almost all hospitals and places, we have one-stop center where a person can report to the police. After reporting to the police, they can actually talk to a lawyer. After talking to a lawyer, they can talk to a psychologist and social worker. So, people, when a person is violated, they need to report. They get police reports. They go for counseling and all. But of course, they are quite so that there's the one-stop center that is in some institutions, government institutions like hospitals. But beyond that, we do have quite a number of organizations where people can go to seek help. For example, if it's a woman, you can go to Musasa Project, you can go to Zimbabwe Lawyers Association, you can go to even the Zimbabwe Gender Commission. They do have a toll-free number. I understand even the First Lady also has a toll-free number where people can actually call to seek help. So we do have quite a number of platforms where people can speak against gender-based violence. Even the traditional leaders, remember, when you're in the rural areas, the traditional leaders is actually an institution or a court that is realized at law. You can actually go there, seek help. They then help you to report or to seek further support from the police. Because they said it's a crime, for example, the person has been raped. Usually they may fail to navigate the processes. Traditional leaders may not hear cases of sexual abuse, but they can help their people to report. I know there's a campaign that is happening in a village, in some community where it is deemed not in my village. So a chief is actually helping people to report. I think it's Chief Bushin, if I'm not mistaken. Is actually helping people to report cases of gender-based violence. So you can actually report to your traditional leaders so that they help you to report cases. We do have, for men, for example, us as fathers against abuse, if a man has been abused, they can call us, we talk to them, we help them to navigate the system, and, we have organizations, quite a number of organizations that help. Childline, for example, for cases that involve children. So there are quite a number of institutions where survivors can get help.
Now, Alois, you raised this point about also the available resources that men can go to if they're in a situation where they're experiencing gender-based violence. Has any of, would you say that the availability of these support systems has to some extent reduced the stigma that comes with reporting, especially for men?
Not really. Unfortunately, we still have very intact negative cultural norms. They are very intact, to be honest with you. Of course, they've made some progress in some instances, but men are not very open to report gender-based violence because of the way they are socialized. They are socialized to be tough, they are socialized to be aggressive. We do have those activities like Pakomurume Kubudaura. And even the social institutions themselves, the social institutions are not ready to help men when they seek help. Even, for example, a man is talking to his friends at a beer hall. They will start laughing at him. Even for your brother, when he comes to you to say, I'm being abused by my spouse, for example, my partner, there's a tendency by people to minimize men's issues, especially on gender-based violence, because the deep-seated belief is that the men should fight to the end. So we do have phrases like petticoat government, say you eat a petticoat government and all those things. So I think culture is still a barrier. Yet, for us as fathers against abuse, we do believe that when men also start opening up on gender-based violence, we believe it can actually also contribute to the reduction of GBV. Because when they are seeking help, they will not use violent ways of dealing with their problems. They will not use violent ways of coping with their challenges. So we actually encourage men to go out and report so that they don't resort to violence as a coping strategy.
I see. Now, while we're still on that, talk to me about how gender-based violence affects one's mental health.
So, gender-based violence has devastating effects on people's mental health, unfortunately. For example, if one is being emotional and even physical abuse, for example, you are being abused by your partner, you begin even questioning yourself. Confidence is affected, self-esteem is affected. The mind is the human being, is the engine of the person. And once the mental health of the person is tainted, obviously, even the person may not function well productively. So you notice that if a person is being abused by their partner, their confidence levels is affected, their self-esteem is affected, they feel like they're useless. That's why you notice that normally survivors of gender-based violence, even when they are within, a certain group of people, be it in church, be it in families, usually they resort to withdraw. They may not want to be associated with some groups because they are not confident. When you are being abused, there's that tendency of psychologically, you would think that everyone is aware of what's happening to you. And you begin to think that you are not adequate. You lose that sense of adequacy because of gender-based violence. So it actually destroys the whole person. And when it's also even emotional violence, you also even doubt yourself. You question, for example, issues around body shaming. You look at yourself and the way people are shaming you, and you think that you are the worst person on this planet. So even in terms of performance at work and all those things, even in terms of your general social roles, you may not perform them quite well. And for men, we've also seen instances where a person, unekadora and all those things, we call that sexual abuse or emotional abuse. So you begin to also think that you are not adequate. So really, the devastating effects of mental health on human beings are too much. And you will notice that so many people, when people are suffering so many times when people are going through gender-based violence, their general well-being is affected. And even confident to speak out, they may not. They also start blaming themselves. They blame on themselves to say, am I the contributor? They start blaming themselves and they look at everyone as a potential perpetrator. So those are some of the challenges, the psychological and mental health challenges that come with GBV.
I see. You're tuned into the deep dive right here on Capitalk 100.4 FM, Harare's Heartbeat. And this evening we are talking about this day, which is a significant day on the global calendar, the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which has officially begun today. And it's a worldwide campaign that runs from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. And this is where governments, communities, civil society, men and women, all communities come together to say no to gender-based violence. Zimbabwe is joining the rest of the world in this important movement. And I am having this conversation with Mr. Alois Nyamazana, the Executive Director of Fathers Against Abuse. And we've spoken about the significance of this day, especially in the Zimbabwean context, and also looked at how it usually affects people's mental health, and also looked at how it creates stigma usually, and how culture has also created this barrier that prevents men from reporting. So, Alois, where are we getting it wrong in addressing gender-based violence as a nation? Because year after year, when the 16 days start, lots and lots of communities, lots and lots of organizations come together and make noise about this, and saying no to silence, yes to protecting lives, and yet we still have a lot of cases that are being reported. What are we doing wrong? Where are we getting it wrong in addressing gender-based violence as a nation?
Thank you very much. That is a very important question, but let me start by acknowledging the progress that we've made as a country.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have done quite well in terms of addressing this not well, but I think we are making progress. We are going somewhere. So recently I was actually attending a certain gathering where the Zimbabwe Republic Police was actually highlighting, statistics of GBV this year compared to last year. And I was actually, to be honest with you, I got a bit of hope because there is some reduction. Though sometimes, unfortunately, if there's a reduction, it can also mean that people are dying in silence. But, that's the challenge. Yeah, but I also like the decline in statistics. But I think as a country, we have also seen, especially issues around child marriages, issues around domestic violence. I think statistically, we are not where we were before. So we can actually say the noise that we are making somehow is working. But like what you rightly said, the problem is still very, very bad. We still have a huge challenge. And for me, really, it's about the social norms, it's about the religious norms and the cultural norms. I think people are still tied to social norms where GBV is normalized, especially in the context of intimate partner relationships. There is a belief that, it's normal for partners who are in love to fight. Some actually believe that there's no actual love. They believe that it's something that is ingrained in some cultures to say, so those social norms that normalize violence, I think there's still a very huge challenge. And I think the culture of silence is still also there, especially in instances where a family member is involved and that family member is the breadwinner. Usually people are not willing to talk about this. And when people don't get punished, the tendency is that they continue perpetrating because they know that there is impunity that happens. So I think that one is actually deterrent, and it's the reason why sometimes they continue facing this challenge. But also, I think the other challenge is also, I still feel we need to somehow simplify our legal system and make it more accessible. We have seen instances where sometimes survivors end up dropping cases, of sexual violence and gender-based violence because sometimes I feel the cases take long to be finalized. So we need to start expediting the process of resolving cases so that people can feel confident to access the justice system, to approach the justice system, to talk about their issues. So I think those are some of the challenges that are still affecting. And I think for me really there's also the issue of when things happen, those things do perpetuate gender-based violence. So and also men, for example, men involvement to say, where are the men? They need to speak. We are fathers, we are uncles, we are brothers, we do have influence within our social institution. Do you know, for example, this thing that we call RORA, or child marriage? No, we don't want our children to get married. They will not these things will not happen. So men should be part of the solution. So, for example, as Fathers Against Abuse, we actually having a campaign that we are calling Be the Solution. Or during these 15 days of activism, we are saying men, let's be part of the solution in terms of addressing gender-based violence. So we really need men to be part of those. The fact that they are not quite involved and they think that it's a women issue, I think it's still a problem for me.
Okay, Alois, just wondering here. You raised the issue and stuff like that, and if you look at the issue generational differences, especially in the context of marriage entity. From your observation, from your assessment, is there like a decline in my cases, like the older generation and the current generation in terms of my gender-based violence cases?
I think it depends on context, but I would say, of course there has been a decline, but the statistics are significantly high because people normalize those things. And the other, constraint is poverty, my sister. So people are in relationships as sources of income, unfortunately. They are in relationships for survival. They don't have sources of income, mostly women and children, women actually, unfortunately. They're in these relationships because sometimes they know when they go, they don't have money to pay rent, they don't have money to look after children, they have 4 children, they have nothing else can do. So I think that's the main challenge. So I would say, in as much as there's a decline, but the statistics for me are still alarmingly high. And the major contributor is issues around poverty, issues around social norms, like what I said. We have people who trivialize violence. It's not an issue, but it's violence. You know what I mean? Yeah, so we still have people who trivialize violence. But because some research is actually showing that around 65% of people who are in marriages are encountering gender-based violence. So it's alarming and it's bad.
Okay, so how can families create safer environments for these women and children that are in vulnerable situations? Both looking at before, where, for example, if you're a parent and you can see, how do you help and create a safe environment? Compared to Kudara, where if someone wanted to come back home, it's okay. So now, what can families do differently to create safer environments for women and children?
Thank you very much. I think the concept of Zokera power by marriage is still there. So I think that's the point of course, things have changed, but it's not, people normally, for example, let's look in the Christian fraternity. There's this verse which says, have you ever heard about it?
Yes, God has divorced, yeah.
God has divorced. So people just focus on that verse, even if a person is being abused. And so within the family context, we have Zimbabwe that is 80% Christian. So when the family hears that, their child is being abused, sometimes they say, you know what, my child, so I think we need to then change the narrative. I am a Christian myself, and I believe that the definition of marriage that God intends is a marriage that is filled with love. You know what I mean? And once that love ceases to exist and the violence steps in, I think that's not what God wants.
Okay.
Yes. So I think in families, we need to be very clear in terms of how we interpret some Bible verses. We need to be, instead of just praying for survivors, let's also offer practical solutions so that we prevent death, we prevent injuries. I think there's also the stigma around divorce in our African context. That is because of religious beliefs. We also need to destigmatize issues around divorce in marriage. A failed marriage does not necessarily mean that a person is bad. If a marriage fails, for example, if my marriage fails, my family should accept me because it may not reflect who am I. But maybe it's a relationship that did not just work. You know what I mean? So I think we need to start destigmatize divorce in families and accept people. Have you noticed, my sister, people who die, especially in relationships, or those who get injured, kazhinji kacho vanenge vatomboudza vanhu kuti zvinhu hazvinondimirira munhu, but people vanenge vachienda vachizama kukansela vachizama vachingobuda, they start fighting and all those things. I think we need to prioritize safety when we're helping our family members who are going through violence. Let's place and service. Let's assess the behavior of the perpetrator. Because when the perpetrator is too violent and it can put the risk of our family member, the life of our family member at risk, why can't we maybe separate them and find out if there's genuine change and perhaps we see what we can do. But for me, really, we need to make sure that people in intimate relationships, whenever we hear about violence at family level, if we have our relative who is suffering from violence, let's not trivialize their issues. Let's protect their safety. If it means reporting, if it means finding counseling, the family should be a support system. Actually, our women and even men, when they are being abused, they should see their families as places of safety where they can seek help without being judged.
So what happens where someone is supposed to see their family as a place of safety? What happens in cases where Mr. Nyamazana is the father and he was also very violent in the home, and this is all everybody dosha vanotoziya semhuri iwo toti wakutozonoti ndazowirwa nedambudziko rakati. But if that's the norm, and because of what's been that's the example that's been given out, and vanhu vanenge vachitoziva kuti baba ndo zvavanoita kana kuti mai ndo zvavanoita, iwo semwana pauchazoti uchanotaurawo nyaya yako, it's not going to feel like a place of safety. So what happens in situations like that?
Yeah, that's a very complicated situation in my view. But I think we also need to, within the communities, so if you look, the situation that you are presenting, my sister, we actually have a broken family relationship where maybe the father is the perpetrator or perhaps the mother is the perpetrator, and the children don't feel safe in that system. So it also then calls for communities and other social institutions like the church. I always, I'm a church elder, and I always say that the church, being a very influential institution, should normalize talking about these issues, should normalize opening up spaces for people to feel vulnerable within those spaces. So I think churches, structures within communities should also be free, because I'm now talking about the systems approach. So if the family system is failing, if the family system is not a place of safety, let's go out. Let's go into the community. Let's create systems within communities where people can feel safe. Looking at issues like, even in the rural areas, for example, I also mentioned earlier on issues like traditional leadership institutions. People can get help from those sources. Even in towns, people like councillors and other community leaders should actually be proactive in terms of helping people who may be facing this challenge. Because already when the father is abusive and the mother is abusive, the child is then left with very few options within the family unit. So I think we need also then to look, and also even the extended family. So for us as fathers against abuse, one thing that we normally tell each other as men, let's hold each other to account. So myself, when my brother is abusing maybe his wife, it is my responsibility to hold him to account. So I think even at family level, we need to normalize conversations around gender-based violence so that we can hold each other to account. That's how we can then utilize our concept of ubuntu as Africans to fight gender-based violence.
So as fathers against abuse, what would you say right now to the men and the boys that are tuned into Capitalk about the role that they can play in reducing gender-based violence?
I think I will repeat what I just said now, to say as men, we are very influential. We have power to end gender-based violence. We are brothers, we are uncles, we are brothers, we are whatever we are in our various social spaces, be it at the workplace. Let's normalize preventing gender-based violence. Let's hold each other to account as men so that we can be part of the solution as against gender-based violence. I always tell men that gender-based violence is not a women's issue. It's a developmental issue. Imagine the money that we're spending as a country to give treatment to people who have been injured, maybe Vanwaremadzwa and all those things. Imagine Mario together. Maybe perhaps you could actually use it to develop infrastructure and all those. So we are losing even billions of dollars, on gender-based violence. So we need to look at not only from a human rights perspective, but even from a developmental perspective. It's a serious human rights issue, gender-based violence. But let's also consider the developmental implications, because we know matter all of us, men and women. So as men, within our spheres, let's use our influence positively to stop gender-based violence. You can, of course, I would say there are very good men out there, but it's not enough to be a good man. You need to then go a step further and speak against gender-based violence.
And then just quickly before we get to the 7 p.m. news, someone might be listening right now and they think, I don't want to do these bad things, but somehow I just find myself, doing these things and participating in gender-based violence, and I'm a father now or I'm a mother and I want to stop the abuse. Are there any counseling services available for people who are walking the journey and facing these demons to say, you know what, I want to do better, I want to be a better person?
Yes, it's like what I said earlier on. For example, us as fathers against abuse, we are very open to men. We like actually to talk to men when they are facing challenges, especially even their relationships, even on other social health issues. They should reach out to us. We have organizations like Zimbabwe Gender Commission. We have organizations like Parliament's Forum. We have quite a number of other organizations that are there that can help men and also even women. We have Musasa Project, we have Zwala, quite a number of organizations. So there are platforms where people can actually speak. Even the police, victim-friendly unit, is actually manned by trained police officers who can actually sit down with you. People think that when they go to the police, they are going to be arrested. But let me tell Zimbabweans listening right now, the victim-friendly unit, you can actually go there with your spouse, with your partner, and you tell them, we are having this problem. Can you please counsel us? They can actually help you without even arresting you. So we do have structures and institutions where people can actually get help. But let me also end by saying, technology facilitated gender-based violence is another serious issue. So whenever you're holding a phone, a laptop, let's also make sure that we are using those gadgets responsibly.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Nyamazana, for joining us on the deep dive.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Have a good night too. We were just talking about the importance of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, because today marks a significant day on the global calendar where the whole world is campaigning 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. It's time for the news.